Thank you all. Good afternoon. It's nice to have some applause when you're walking up on stage today, and we have no snow. So anyway, good afternoon and welcome to this 2020 State of Downtown. That video was awesome. I love seeing the future of the city. What a perfect way to set up our event today with our theme, Delivering on the Next Decade. It's great to see so many of you here today as we come together to reflect on the past year downtown and the new year ahead, the new decade. 10 years ago, downtown Seattle was emerging from the Great Recession, entering a period of incredible transformation. In the past decade, we've experienced record growth in the number of jobs located here, the number of people choosing to live and visit downtown, and the amount of private and public investment we've experienced. I want to call your attention to additional programming that's available today after the lunch. Based on your feedback, we're once again offering afternoon breakout sessions on issues impacting downtown. We can only cover so much during this lunch, so we are giving you a chance to dive a little deeper into a handful of timely topics and ask questions and connect with other members. With the help of some of the leading experts across a number of fields, the breakout sessions will examine the possibility of lighting I-5 through the downtown, the future of urban retail, predictions and projections for the next decade, and 4 innovative development projects that are shaping our skyline. There's still some seats available, so if you're interested and have the time for one or more of the sessions, please see a staff member outside the ballroom after lunch. Your ticket will also include that happy hour networking after the sessions are over. So before we move on, I have one more housekeeping issue. I know all the phones are out, so let's put them to some good use. So we'd like you to amplify today's conversation and post about the event on social media using the hashtag SOD2020. As DSA members, elected officials, and special guests, you're here today because you care about downtown and our city. You're here because you want to stay informed and engaged, because you want to be a part of a community that's shaping the future of the downtown and the city. While we've experienced incredible recent success, we all know we have serious challenges ahead of us, including affordability, mobility, homelessness, crime, and untreated mental health and substance abuse issues. DSA has been hard at work over the past year on the issue of public safety. In fact, a year ago this month, we released, with partner organizations, a report on the impact of prolific offenders in downtown and other neighborhoods. Last fall, we published a follow-up report that detailed the failings of our criminal justice system that keep repeat criminals on the streets, impacting everyone from small retailers to residents to the most vulnerable among us. And just last month, we raised our voices with members, mid-ratepayers, and other partners to say, enough is enough. It's time to break up the decades-old problem of drug dealing and violence plaguing 3rd and Pine and spilling over into other parts of downtown. We know that we could not have the impact and influence on these issues without the support of many of you in the room. You may not, if you're not a DSA member, I'm going to find you because you will be. There's a few of you here today. We need you on the team. You can learn about membership outside in the foyer right after the lunch today. If we're truly going to deliver on the next decade, we need everyone who cares about downtown and loves this city to join forces. Now I'd like to recognize our generous sponsors and partners and elected officials who are here with us today. If you don't mind, please hold your applause until the end. First, I'd like to thank our visionary sponsor, Lane Powell. In a few minutes, you'll hear from Lane Powell President Barbara Duffy as she introduces our keynote speaker, Alicia Jean-Baptiste. Also, thank you to influencer sponsor Alaska Airlines. Seattle's hometown airline is sponsoring the lounge and networking portion of today's event. Today's Vanguard sponsor is Schwabe, Williamson & Wyatt, They're helping us bring this afternoon's breakout sessions to life. And our catalyst sponsor today is Zurich Insurance. Thank you for our partner sponsors, Amazon, Ike Smart City, Mortensen Construction, Seattle University. And appreciation also goes to our steward sponsors, Biomed Realty, Kleiss Properties, JLL, Lease Crutcher Lewis, McCullough Hill Leary, Metzler Real Estate, RC Hadreen Company, Seattle Children's Research Institute, Seneca Group, Unico Properties, Washington Holdings. And another thank you to our media partner, the Puget Sound Business Journal. Now, I'd like the 76 corporate table hosts to stand, and then I'd like to have a round of applause for all our sponsor partners and our table hosts. So finally, I'd like to give a special welcome to the elected leaders who are here today, and if they could stand to be recognized, and again, hold applause until we conclude announcing. So Seattle Mayor Jenny Durkin is here. You're going to hear from Mayor Durkin shortly. King County Council Member Jean Cole Wells, and Seattle City Council Member Andrew Lewis. Thank you for being here today. So we hope you enjoyed today's discussion about the state of your downtown. Now please join me in welcoming Seattle Mayor Jenny Durkin.
Thank you so much, Marilyn. Good afternoon. What is this, Portland? Good afternoon. It's a little bit better, but still a little weak sauce. I want to thank DSA for having me here today, and looking across this room, seeing so many friends from different parts of the city who have come together in this last year and 2 years as I've been mayor to really have a strong partnerships. Thank you to everyone who's here who supports a vibrant downtown. I also want to take just a minute, look for a second around this room and how crowded it is. I mean, that's amazing. You should give everyone a big hand for doing that. That's not a big hand. The other thing is, if you notice, because so many people are here today, it is really hard for the wait staff to do their work. Let's give them a big round of applause in trying to serve all these people. I am really happy to be here today, and when I was running for office, I lived in the apartments right across the street and saw this go from ground up, and so have seen the changes in Seattle just in the short time that I'm mayor. Whether it's public art projects, advocacy on part of our small businesses, outreach workers, you name it, DSA has been an incredible partner with me as I've been mayor, because they know a vibrant and healthy downtown makes a vibrant and healthy Seattle. So I want to thank all of the people from DSA for everything you've done while I've been mayor. I appreciate that very much. You can clap for them, they're good. So we know that Seattle is one of the fastest growing cities in America. I have the privilege of being the first elected mayor of the city of Seattle that was actually born in Seattle. Think about that. 150 years we've been a city, and I am the first elected mayor of the city of Seattle that was born in Seattle. It shows you that we have been a city that has grown and changed from people coming here because they knew that it reflected the future, it reflected promise, it reflected the next great thing. And we are still that city. We are a city that, if you read an article about 2 weeks ago, I don't remember if it was the Washington Post or New York Times, it said that 5 cities in America have taken 90% of the jobs in the new tech economy. 5 cities in America, and Seattle is one of them. Thank you for everyone here who is part of that amazing growth that has let Seattle be that innovative hub of the future. You know, we know that we have challenges in our downtown area, and I want to address those. But before I do, I also want to take a moment again to thank the people in this room that are providing just amazing opportunity for this city. I saw Maggie Walker, who's worked on our waterfront project for so long. For all the friends of the waterfront, we should give them a huge round of applause. If you have not done it yet, go down and see how different that waterfront is. Go to the Pike Place Market's back porch, as I like to call it, at nighttime, and see the lights of the city and listen, because it's quiet without the viaduct. We are going to be returning our city to that heart, Puget Sound, in a way, and it will be transformational. It is so exciting to see that. It's exciting to see the new life that's coming at Seattle Center. We are going to have a hockey team soon. The Storm are going to repeat champions in the newest arena in America that's going to be the coolest. We will make sure that we have the best music groups, and the Sonics are coming back. Small goals we have. This morning, I got to go to an event where Zillow, one of our great downtown companies, partnered with the city of Seattle on my Innovation Advisory Council and was able to use their core competencies to build a new tool to put in the hands of every case manager working with people experiencing homelessness or housing instability, the ability to connect with vacant housing units. And they have housed over 400 people already, putting that tool in people's hands. I could go on because you all know that I think Seattle is the best city in America. It is the best city, I believe, for innovation. It is the best city to show our progressive values and put good policies in place. And we are leading the nation in so many ways. So yes, I know that we have great challenges that I want to talk about a little bit. But what we have, I think that no other city has, is we have the best people to meet those challenges. And I have full confidence that the people in this room and rooms like this across this city are going to rise up and make sure that we meet our challenges. I saw, for example, people here from Plymouth Housing, Mary's Place, and others who are working every single day to make sure that as this city grows, that our values of humanity translate to those people who have the least, and we make sure that we lift those people up and that every family has housing, that people who have challenges get a place and safe place to live. So thank you for the work all of you are doing. We also know that as our city has grown and we have fewer places, safe places for people to live, that we have more and more people who are experiencing homelessness, and we see it every day in our downtown core. And it breaks our heart. And we know that it is the moral challenge of our time, and we are devoting more resources and partnerships with people that we can actually find places for people to live and make sure that they have access to the health care they need so their mental health or addiction problems can be met. We also know that public safety is a challenge in parts of downtown. And I will tell you that Chief Best and I, we meet on a weekly basis to see where we need to do better and how we can deploy our officers. I want to say a few things. Number one, our Seattle Police Department has led the way in the nation on how to deal with people in crisis, and I want to thank our police officers for the job they do. The job of our firefighters and our police and first responders has changed so much as our city has grown. They responded to almost 17,000 crisis calls last year. Think of that. They are now sometimes the first line for health care or for crisis intervention, and it's getting harder for them to do their jobs. In order for them to do their jobs right, we as a city have to figure out how we work with our partners at the county prosecutor's office, the city attorney's office, the Seattle Municipal Courts, and our social service agencies so that we really can prevent and disrupt crime before it happens, so we provide real opportunity, and that is going to be the long-term solution together with our police officers to provide public safety. But we know that when the shooting happened downtown, it was different for everybody in this room. Our downtown corridor is the heart of our city. And that time of day, that rush hour, is one of the busiest we have in the city of Seattle. 3rd Avenue is many ways the transportation main artery in downtown Seattle. Over 50,000 people a day get on and off buses on 3rd Avenue. Let me just say that again, 50,000 people a day. That's how much our city has grown. Nobody walking home, coming out of a business, going shopping, there with their kids, should ever have to fear that they could be the victim of gun violence. That is wrong. I have walked that downtown corridor through every stage of my life. I've walked past that corner on every stage of my life, with my children and without my children. Every one of us saw ourselves in that event and thought it could have been us. I recognize that every one of our businesses downtown wants to be here because it's a thriving city. And again, I have to not just thank DSA, but I have to thank downtown businesses who have been engaging with me for 2 years, but since the shooting had, again, came and said, we want to be a partner in fixing this. I got to thank you for that partnership. Following the shooting, I met with a number of businesses in the area. We will continue to do so. But Chief Best and I are absolutely committed to make sure that this is not what we've seen before, a short-term fix, something where it disappears after the next moment arrives. We are looking for long-term solutions in the businesses that exist, in the way the police, in the physical surroundings. We want to work with the Downtown Seattle Association and others to really activate that corridor. I want to thank DSA for what it's done, for example, in Occidental Park and Westlake Park, who took 2 parts of our city and said, we're going to make that a place that is alive for the residents and people working in Seattle. And it's been amazing. So we will continue to work to make sure that we have a long-term, durable solution to those problems we have seen in this corridor for far too long. We know that the solution is not just police officers. Police officers are an incredibly important part of public safety, and having that presence is an incredibly important part of public safety. But I believe personally that if a 22-year-old man opens fire on a street corner with a gun, and he has that kind of arrest record, we have failed over and over and over again as a society, and we have to change that. We are investing unprecedented amounts to give our youth real opportunity and real hope. We're investing in social service programs, incredible messengers to get youth and get them so that they will not be pointed towards gangs or drugs. Thanks to people in this room, we are providing 2 years free college to every Seattle public student, and then we will provide them jobs and opportunity. We have to change the course of our inequities in our society, and that long-term will also give us greater public safety. Because public safety requires a strong police department and a strong presence. That can help, but what really helps is a strong and healthy society. And I am committed with you as mayor to work at every level of that, to be lifting up families who need it, giving true opportunity and hope to our youth, but making sure that those who commit crimes are held accountable, and that we make sure that we have a long-term plan for when those people reenter society, they reenter with the job, trainings, and support they need so we do not see the cycle that we have. We must do more in the field of behavioral health. We have not lived up to the promise that there would be enough resources in community to help people. It was right to deinstitutionalize people, but the promise was we would have resources in community to deal with people who have significant challenges, and we have not. So together, I think working with county and state and all our officials and businesses, we can turn vitality back, but we can again lead the nation to show that there is a humane way to disrupt and prevent crime, At the same time, you deal with crime in a very decisive and correct manner. We must be smart. Seattle leads the nation in so many ways. I think if we come together, we can lead the nation in this way too. And I'll leave you with this. I think there is far too much division in our country. There are too many ways for us to yell and shout and disagree with each other. Very few problems are ever solved that way. I am proudest of the moments that I have been in rooms where we bring people together with different points of view, but more than that, different talents who roll up their sleeves and solve a problem. And that's what I look forward to doing with DSA this year and people in this room. Let's roll up our sleeves so that next year we can be talking about how we've improved in every one of these ways and how we've made Seattle better, more equitable, more safe, and so that we can say we truly are the city of the future. Thank you so much.
Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome from Lane Powell, Barbara Duffy.
Well, good afternoon. I couldn't be more excited to be here and represent Lane Powell, which is, once again, the visionary sponsor of DSA's State of Downtown. Now, I've been attending this event for many years, but this is my first time to address the audience as the president of our firm. Lane Powell is one of the largest law firms in the Puget Sound region. Much like successful cities and downtowns, large law firms must be in constant pursuit of the best strategies to approach the challenges in our fast-changing times. How do we continue to attract and retain diverse talent? How do we best invest in our clients to anticipate their needs and leverage our thoughts and experience to provide them the highest value? And how do we help our employees and our clients thrive in these dynamic times in our booming region? Now, all of us here know our organization's strengths, but we also know we cannot rest on those strengths. We continue to work hard to meet the needs of our ever-changing environment. Downtown Seattle is the engine of our region, and as DSA members know quite well, if our downtown declines, all of us suffer mightily. Our downtown fosters a spirit of creativity and innovation. There's just an energy to downtown Seattle. You can just feel it. At Lane Powell, we've developed deep roots in downtown Seattle, dating back to the 1880s. And you're going to hear a little more about that period in Seattle's history later in the hour. Now, with DSA, we strive for a downtown that is vibrant and one that is vital, one that can remain so for the next decade and beyond as Seattle continues to evolve into a global city. Now, that evolution, it comes with well-chronicled growing pains. We've heard about a few just moments ago, raising questions about what our future city looks like and what it will become. We know that our ecosystem mirrors that of a handful of cities, regions in the midst of rapid growth and stunning economic success, while grappling with affordability, with transportation, and with access to services. San Francisco, in particular, shares many of Seattle's storylines. The theme of today's event, delivering on the next decade, underscores the importance of our opportunity. We are operating now from a position of strength in so many respects, strength that should bring us confidence that we can properly face the challenges of our growing city. Our featured speaker today is well attuned to this notion. Alicia Jean-Baptiste is the president and CEO of the San Francisco Bay Area Planning and Urban Research Association, SPUR. SPUR's mission is to promote good planning and good government in the San Francisco Bay Area through research, through education, and through advocacy. Prior to taking the reins at SPUR, Alicia served as the organization's deputy director, overseeing policy and strategic initiatives. But before Spur, she held senior public administration and public policy roles for the city and county of San Francisco, including as chief of staff at both the city's planning department and the San Francisco Municipal Transportation Agency. Now, as San Francisco struggles with a widening affordability gap, its housing production, transportation system, all have lagged behind its surging local economy. Does that sound familiar? Alicia Baptiste and Spur developed a long-range strategy 50 years ahead to examine how the choices that are made today will impact the city and the region of tomorrow.
Please welcome Alicia John Baptiste.
Good afternoon, everybody. Thank you for that welcome, and thank you for the introduction, Barb. I'm really happy to be with you all today, and it has been such a pleasure to spend some time in Seattle. I have always wanted to be a person who is able to start my presentations with some kind of joke to make everybody, comfortable and laugh. But what I've discovered over time is I'm actually just not that funny, so I hope that you will bear with me if I just jump right in. Thank you. See, it worked. So you've seen a little bit of an overview about some of the similarities between the Bay Area and Seattle. And I want to highlight a few themes to talk about some of the things that we're grappling with, and then I'll spend a little bit of time talking about how we're approaching the future. So of course, the Bay Area today, like Seattle, is booming. We've created over 700,000 jobs in just the past 10 years. Our population has grown by 1 million people in the past 20 years. And the jobs that we're creating are really located at the high end of the wage spectrum. A lot of this then has driven our household income change, where we've added over 625,000 households earning more than $100,000 a year in the past 20 years, driven in large part by the fact that tech industry salaries are quite high. So we are really in the Bay Area a place of staggering wealth today. We have 75 billionaires, supposedly that is the highest per capita of any region. And astoundingly, we have over 180,000 millionaires in the Bay Area, and that is excluding real estate assets. San Francisco, our biggest city, it's both a city and a county, but its budget is over $12 billion annually. And our regional GDP is close to $500 billion. So this kind of economic growth and prosperity that we're experiencing in the region is the kind of prosperity that regions all over the country strive for and dream of. Because we believe that when the prosperity comes, when the jobs come, the rising tide will lift all of our boats. We will have the resources we need to live lives full of meaning and security and fulfillment. But what we are experiencing today in the Bay Area is that the rising tide is not lifting all boats, and in fact, it is beginning to drown people. And this is because the growth that we're experiencing is happening on top of a very deeply unequal foundation. We have 75 billionaires. We also have some of the highest rates of income inequality in the nation. And of course, the US is already one of the most economically unequal countries in the world. Wealth and income inequality are also deeply racialized. In the Bay Area, families of color have 10 times less the amount of wealth as white families and have nearly half the median income. And the tech industry is really fueled by venture capitalism. Venture capitalism, at least in the Bay Area, is extraordinarily white and male dominated. 70% white, 8-to-2 male to female gender split, and fun fact, a full 40% of all folks working in venture capital in the Bay Area today went to either Harvard or Stanford. I went to Harvard too, so. Just had to get that in there. So our middle class is disappearing. We've had all of this job growth, and yet negative growth in middle wage industries. We've added low wage jobs, particularly in the service sector, but the rate of wage rates has not kept pace, and people are actually worse off than they were 20 years ago. So fundamentally, the prosperity that we're creating at the top end in the region today is not being felt in any meaningful way by the broader Bay Area population. And in this country, the private sector generates the wealth that we use both for our individual purposes and for our collective purposes. It's what we receive individually in wages, and it's what we pay in taxes for our collective goods. But over the past few decades, there have been multiple policy decisions at the federal level, at the state level, and on that have resulted in wealth being held in greater and greater amounts by companies themselves and by fewer and fewer individuals. We have an added burden in the state of California because in 1978, we passed a law that capped our property tax rates on both the residential and the commercial side. And what this resulted in was a disincentivizing of cities to approve housing because the cost of serving residents was going to increase at a rate much greater than what could be recaptured through tax revenue. And then because we don't build housing and we limit the supply of housing, we're creating another dynamic, which is that for those people who can afford to get into the housing market and can afford home ownership, they are watching their wealth increase exponentially year over year as property values increase without any proportionate increase in taxation, while all of the people who can't get into the market completely miss that opportunity for wealth development. Thus, we further our economic inequality. We do have a very active philanthropic community in the Bay Area. And in fact, a lot of folks report that this is one of their most important causes. But less than 10% of the money that is flowing from philanthropic endeavors in the Bay Area is going to the actual people of the Bay Area. So that's the money side of what we're experiencing. But there are other factors which are placing a lot of pressure on folks today. And part of it is that over time, we've really divested from the systems that are supposed to serve all of us, things like transportation and housing and education. And what that means practically is that individuals are carrying more and more of the share of what used to be publicly provided. And to go with just one example, one of the outcomes of the passage of Proposition 13 in 1978 is that California went from 5th in the nation in per pupil spending on education to 48th today. The incredible underinvestment in our school system has meant that more and more people are trying to find good education for their kids, meaning that they're leaving the school system altogether. We've always had people with means sending their children to private school. Now we have folks very much in the middle section of our economy doing the same. And what we see now, Oakland is one of our biggest cities in our region. 74% of the kids in Oakland are coming from low-income families, and at least 1,000 of them are homeless, and that is probably a number that is undercounted. Our lack of affordable housing and our overall lack of supply means that what the market can provide today is housing for people at 200% of AMI or greater. Those are the only people who can afford to compete in the marketplace. And so what's happening as a result of all of this is that we're losing our diversity as a region, most profoundly in San Francisco itself, where we've seen over 60% decline in the African American population in the last 5 decades. We also have the impacts of our spatial policy making, and we are a region, much like Seattle, that is defined by 3 different things. First, we embraced the highways movement back in the 50s and 60s, and it's really exciting that you all are looking at the different ways that you can recapture that land today. We haven't done that in a meaningful way as of yet. We also, when we embraced the building of freeways, we tore out existing rail systems. We tore out existing public transit systems. We also racially segregated our communities through redlining and racial covenants. And then we did something interesting in the 1980s. We embraced environmentalism. And now we have incredible amounts of really beautiful and pristine open space that we all can enjoy. And this was a really important decision. But what was missing when this decision was made was a commitment to start building housing where development already existed. And so largely, we have simply stopped building housing. And because we don't build housing, and because there is so much competition for places to live as our region is growing, where there's competition for the places that are relatively affordable. Now, those places are the places that were created through redlining for the most part, that suffered from underinvestment. Those are the places that are currently affordable. So we have now today the same pattern that we baked into our spatial organization of only allowing people of color to live in certain places. But now the process is one in which people with means are outcompeting those without, and the communities are moving outside of the Bay Area to find homes that are affordable. On top of all of this, we're short by hundreds of billions of dollars for public transportation, $7 billion just for a couple of years in San Francisco alone. So we have these incredibly soul-crushing commutes. Super commuters traveling 3 hours each direction to get to and from work. And we have people living at risk of climate change, wildfires, sunny day flooding, sea level rise, etc. So I don't know if this looks familiar to any of you who might have taken Psychology 101 in college, but this is Maslow's hierarchy of need. And Maslow argued that people are not able to fully self-actualize if their more basic needs go unmet. Things like food and shelter and safety. And in the Bay Area today, the prosperity that we are experiencing is not translating into these needs being met. Every day, 1 in 10 people go hungry, and most acutely, we have 35,000 people living on the streets. This has increased by 24% in the last 2 years alone. And what all of this data is not showing you, and what I hope to convey, is what this feels like. The fear that so many people in our region live with on a daily basis, every day, worried that some unexpected life event will be the difference for them between being housed and unhoused. It's also not really showing how high up the economic ladder this feeling of insecurity is climbing in our region today. We're just starting to see this now in attitudes towards taxation. So the Bay Area has long been a place that never saw a tax it didn't like. You know, we can reliably support public transportation taxes, schools taxes, et cetera. When we do polling today, we are finding for the first time people saying, no, I cannot afford even a 1/4 cent increase in a sales tax because of the impact it will have on my life. So that's the view from the Bay. So we are both living the dream and living the nightmare at the same time. We have growth, we have jobs, we have new technology, we have IPOs, and we have incredibly beautiful open space, and everybody's house is worth $2 million. And we are coming face to face with suffering and poverty and the failure of our collective systems on a daily basis. We walk out of that $2 million home and we step over people on the sidewalk. We build a new park and we wonder not how are people going to use this, but how many people are going to live here? And what's frustrating about the Bay Area is that we complain about this, we are worried, we are wringing our hands, but we still refuse to build housing. So what do we do about this? And also, why does it matter? And I think this question of why it matters is important, and there are a lot of rational self-interest answers to this question. It's less expensive to avoid a crisis than it is to respond to a crisis. Companies really don't want to locate in places where their employees cannot afford to live. Societies that have greater equality are more stable than those which do not. But the question really at the heart of why it matters is a question of values and beliefs, and it's a question of what we're willing to accept for ourselves and what we are willing to accept for others. And I don't know about you all, but when I was growing up, what I was taught is that here in the United States, what we value, maybe more than anything else, are the rights of the individual. The right to say what we think, the right to go where we choose, the right to assemble with whom we please, the right to pursue happiness in the way that has most meaning for each of us. And this value comes from a foundational belief that is right there in the Declaration of Independence, that all men are created equal. And because we're all created equal, it follows that we would maximize our individual rights. And it is absolutely true that all men are created equal. I would argue that it is more true that all humans are created equal. But regardless, there are actually two problems with this foundational belief. And the first is that when this was written, it didn't actually apply to all men. It applied to all white men of a particular economic status. Racism has been part of our country from the beginning. People writing this didn't actually believe that Native Americans were equal to white people. They didn't actually believe that African Americans were equal to white people. They didn't actually believe that women were equal to men. They didn't believe that Southern Europeans were equal to Northern Europeans. So these individual rights on which we're based actually never extended to all men. And the second, really importantly, is that instead of understanding all men are created equal to mean that each person has the same inherent value, that no person is inherently more valuable than any other, we took this to mean that each of us has the same chance of success in life. And then that made us think that where we end up is not just a function of our individual choices, but a function of our individual goodness, our merit, our individual worth and value. So it followed that people with money and power were in fact inherently more valuable than people without. And we started to believe that people who were poor because they were bad, that it was their badness and their immorality that led to their poverty. And this is a really deep misunderstanding, and it has tragic consequences. Because what we believe about causality influences how we set things up and how we respond. So our belief that people with money and power were good meant that we created our systems, whether it was redlining or tearing out those public transportation systems, continue to push money towards those same people. And what it means today, when we see somebody who is homeless, our assumption is not that they are a good person. Our assumption is that they have done something to cause their situation. And when we find out that it's a teacher who is homeless, a teacher living in their car, we're still a little bit shocked. There's another problem with this foundational belief, and that's a problem of what's missing. We somehow forgot or overlooked that our individual well-being is actually a byproduct of our collective well-being. And I'm just gonna make this really personal. So today, when I go to work, I go from Oakland to San Francisco. I take our regional public transportation system. And I step out of BART in the morning, and sometimes when I'm coming up those stairs, what I am seeing is somebody shooting drugs into their neck. And sometimes what I'm seeing is somebody screaming obscenities at me. And sometimes it's a woman with her small children and a sign that says, "No job, 3 kids, please help."
And sometimes what I'm seeing is somebody laying out on the sidewalk. And when I come back 9 hours later to go home, and that person is in the exact same position that they were 9 hours earlier, I am stopping to see if they are dead. My children have learned to take dollars with them when we go to run errands because they are always going to see somebody in need and they want to be ready. So it doesn't matter that I have stable housing, and it doesn't matter that I can afford to live in the right neighborhood where my kids go to a good public school. We are not okay. We cannot feel okay when we are surrounded by such intense suffering. And I am not willing to accept this reality. I hate that my children can now, thank you. I hate that my children can now assess how long a person has been homeless. We should be living in a society in which homelessness is shocking. And we should be living in a society in which Maslow's hierarchy of need, those bottom rungs, are the bare minimum of what we meet. And for those of us who are fortunate enough to live lives where our needs are being met, we have got to recognize that, in fact, if they are not met for all of us, they are met for none of us. So the question is, what do we do about all this? So at Spur, we have been putting together a roadmap for a better future. And as part of this, we've been analyzing the trends and the forces that are shaping our region today. And we've been imagining different futures based on how we respond to all of these factors. So we've examined forces, things like climate change and the role of the federal government, and trends, housing production, wage rates. And we honed in on 2 questions that we think are critical to defining what future we will achieve. Will we embrace or reject economic prosperity? And will we become more or less socially inclusive? And we honed in on these as the essential questions because, as I said earlier, whether or not we have economic prosperity determines whether we have the resources we need in the aggregate to serve all of our needs. And there is a real thread of belief in the Bay Area, and this happens every time we grow, but there is a real thread of belief in the Bay Area that economic prosperity is the causal problem. So this is something that we track carefully. But this question of social inclusion is not just equally important, it is also the thing that we haven't yet figured out. And putting social inclusion at the center of our roadmap is essential, because if we don't explicitly design for this, we will not achieve it. So we imagined 4 different futures, keying off of the answers to these questions. And in the first one, we imagine that we have economic prosperity, but we have social exclusion. And in this scenario, we can see a future where our cities maybe solve their problems, where we figure out how to fund public transportation within the confines of San Francisco as a city, where we figure out climate adaptation in those confines, but we still refuse to build housing. So you have to be able to afford to buy in. In the second scenario, we have the inverse. This is a scenario where we've figured out how to come together for our collective good. We have social inclusion, but we've decided that prosperity is the problem, and we've driven all business away. And in this scenario, we can all work together, but we don't have the resources that we actually need. This third scenario is the one where we have neither economic prosperity nor social inclusion, and this is definitely the dog-eat-dog scenario. This is the version where a handful of people figure out how to have enough money to live decent lives, and everybody else is essentially screwed. And the people who have money end up having to live very armored lives as well. There's really no security. And then in the fourth scenario, we have a combination of economic prosperity and social inclusion. And the key again here in this scenario is the focus on collective action for collective good. We embrace our economic success, and we direct more of our resources towards the social systems that we all need to thrive. And really importantly, underlying this scenario is the recognition that none of us are okay unless all of us are okay. And we do really believe that that future is available to us. We have to be very careful as we're designing interventions going forward that we think beyond our city limits, or we risk creating a gated utopia. And as you all think about the future of Seattle, I encourage you to think about what would happen if Seattle solved all of its problems, but the surrounding communities were left behind. But to achieve this future, the most powerful thing we could do is to expand our belief system, expand our values, so that we're designing our future explicitly around the concept of interdependence rather than independence. Recognizing, however, that belief systems can be challenging to change, there are more practical and tactical steps that we can take. We can start by prioritizing investment in the systems that are meant to serve all of us. And we've been incredibly jealous of ST3 in the Bay Area. Public transportation investment is one of the most essential things we can do if we want to create communities where all people can thrive. Similarly, we can prioritize residential development. Nationally, our cities are facing housing affordability crises, and to address this, we must be building vastly greater numbers of housing units. We can invest in climate adaptation. We know that climate adaptation will hit our most vulnerable communities the hardest, and we are already seeing this in action. And really importantly, we have to start rethinking our social safety nets, our access to opportunity, our schools, because we can't climb the hierarchy of need if the ladder isn't there. And to enable all of this, which represents really significant investment, we have to consider how we're using our resources. On both the collective side and the individual side, we are underserved. It is time for us to prioritize investment in our collective needs, and it is time for us to bolster both the incomes and the wealth of those who are at the bottom rungs of our economic ladder. Poverty becomes intergenerational because we don't give people enough to get out of poverty. There are very, very few people in this world who choose to be poor. This is a structural problem, and it requires structural reform. So sometimes when we're confronting challenges at this scale, it can be a little bit overwhelming. And certainly as an individual, it can feel very much like, where do I go? How do I even start? But I want to just remind us that those of us in this room today are the ones who are making and shaping the policies that impact all of us, whether it is company policies or city policies. We have the luxury of choice, and we have the power of collective action. I wish you all could see yourselves right now, because I see a huge group of people with potential for collective action. We are the ones, whether we are on the public side or on the private side, we are the ones who are pushing ballot measures, and we're funding council member campaigns, and we're rebuilding the waterfront, and we're rethinking zoning, and we're writing new company policies. We can choose a different future, and I hope that it will be one that serves us all. Thank you.
Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome DSA President and CEO John Scholes.
I want to start off a little different today and just say that I'm still saddened and angered by the violence that rang out in the heart of our downtown last month. I'm saddened for the loss of life, for those who were injured. I'm saddened to know that there were many people that were afraid to come to work that day that worked near 3rd and Pine. And I'm saddened that for the first time in the 8 years that I've lived downtown, that our family has lived downtown, my daughter grabbed my hand in fear as we were walking a couple of Saturdays ago to lunch at the Virginia Inn, and she realized where she was and realized she was at 3rd and Pine. And I'm angry. I'm angry that for too long, for going on 3 decades, we've had a drug market rooted in the heart of our city. I'm going to return to this issue in my remarks, but I want you to keep it in mind, keep it in the back of your minds as I review downtown's incredible progress and promise over the last couple of decades. And I want you to consider what's at risk. So back to our regularly scheduled programming. Thank you for being here. Thank you for this sold-out house. Thank you for being members of the Downtown Seattle Association. We greatly appreciate your support. Today, I hope to put this incredible run, really a 20-year run that we've had here in downtown Seattle, in some context. I want to offer some highlights from 2019, report on our Downtown Live, Work, Shop, Play report card, and speak to what we must do to sustain this vibrancy and vitality in our downtown. First off, thank you to Alicia for your powerful comments and reminding us of the realities that we don't have to accept in our cities. I've long held great respect for Spur and the incredible work they do in the Bay Area, and now for Alicia as the CEO of that 112-year-old organization. They're lucky to have you. I want to acknowledge my family who's here again with me today. My wife Erin, my kids Parker and Avery, and my mom Carol, who made the trip up I-5 from Tacoma. I really appreciate their support and for being here today. As I was reflecting on the state of our downtown in my comments a few weeks back, I was reminded of a road trip I took with my kids this summer. We headed out to Crested Butte, Colorado. And last year we flew into Crested Butte, and none of us liked that flight from Denver into Gunnison on a tiny little plane over the Rockies, because it just kind of did this. They had to hold my hand for that period. So we decided that, well, maybe we'll do an RV trip instead, because I wanted to see these small towns that I'd never seen before in eastern Oregon, southeast Washington, across Idaho, Utah, and of course into Colorado. But we ditched the RV idea because it's hard to get an RV in and out of these towns. I didn't want to be in an RV park. I wanted to see these small towns. So we rented a big Suburban instead, and we packed it up with our bikes. I went over the rules of the trip. There will be no fighting. You cannot be silly in the back seat, and you cannot eat in the car. Otherwise, I would like you to have a good time on this trip. And then I spent about an hour washing that car, getting it all detailed out. Is there anybody else that washes their rental cars in this room? There's one guy in the back. Thank you for that. So I got it all cherried up. It looked great. And we hit the road. And I've used the term road trip. I just want to be honest with you. We were not roughing it on this trip, okay? This was not, there was no camping. We were not sleeping in the back of the Suburban. I just want to be upfront about that. So we hit the open road, and I was doing that thing that parents do on trips like this. I was like, look at this landscape, these mountains, these canyons, the rivers. This is amazing. Isn't this incredible? I was listening to some dad rock, I'm sure, some Wilco or the War on Drugs or something. And my kids were doing what kids nowadays do. They were in the back seat doing this to the iPads, right? And I kept like, come on, look out the window. And they would humor me and be like, yeah, Dad, it's beautiful, never looking up from the iPad. So we got to visit these incredible towns from Fruita, Colorado, and Baker City, Oregon, and LeGrand, and Pendleton, all these places I'd never been. And I love small towns because they really lay bare the great ingredients and the fundamentals of what make great cities terrific places and downtowns as well. The proximity, the convenience, the walkability, they all have their unique history, their own arts and culture. They're not trying to be anybody else. And it's what makes our downtowns great. So you break it down at that scale and you really feel it. You know, if you forget your bike lock, you don't have to get in your car and drive way out to the edge of town and then park and walk into some big store. You just walk to the local hardware store and then you go get ice cream afterwards. And we did that. And so I was reflecting on, in putting these remarks together, on also what I learned and was reminded of in going through these places, that there's countless number of small towns and larger cities and counties around our country that still have not recovered from the Great Recession. They have not had the good fortune that we've had here in downtown Seattle. And it really puts it in perspective, this incredible 20-year run we've been on of massive change, investment, and growth and prosperity. And yes, a lot of challenges as well. We've been in sort of a beast mode, if you will, in downtown Seattle over the last 20 years. And consider a few stats. So 40% of all the office space that exists in downtown today, and 58% of the residential units created in the last 2 decades. That's pretty phenomenal. In these last 20 years, we've really stretched the geography of our downtown, and we've created new neighborhoods where surface parking lots once sat. And this period that we've been in is not entirely unprecedented, but you've got to go back more than 100 years to find a comparable period of time. 1890 to 1910. It was the year the railroad came to town. The first tunnel under downtown was completed. King Street Station was constructed. The first streetcars and cable cars were built and stretched throughout our city and downtown. We secured our water supply at the Cedar River watershed, and we tripled the capacity in 8 years. I think the worker safety rules were a bit different back then. No hard hats or fluorescent vests. And voters approved the formation of our public power utility, which later became City Light. Major civic and business institutions were created: the Pike Place Market, Nordstrom, Seattle Children's Hospital, Swedish, the Symphony, and the list goes on. We went from 42,000 people in 1890 to nearly 250,000 in 1910. And I think what's important about this period is that the decisions, the investments, the risks that were made, the bold moves that were made, we benefit from all those still today. And as I said, we have been on this equally incredible 20-year stretch from 2000 to 2020. In 2019, this played out in a number of ways. I want to sum those up in about 4 highlights. Number 1, it was a big year for infrastructure in our downtown. The viaduct finally came down. The tunnel under downtown finally opened. And now we've set the stage for a once-in-a-generation opportunity to transform our waterfront with new public spaces, parks, plazas, a connection to Pike Place Market, a new aquarium, a remade Coleman Dock, and much, much more. A new power substation opened in South Lake Union, the first in 30 years, a $200 million substation to power South Lake Union and all the companies that are growing there, complete with a dog park as well. The convention center across this massive 9-acre site began to take shape, and the steel skeleton began to emerge. You can get a sense of the scale of this project if you peek out that window and try to find a construction worker next to one of the massive columns. It really puts it in perspective. The roof of the Seattle Center Arena was severed and is now being supported by temporary steel braces as the bowl is excavated to make room for the Seattle Storm in 2021, then NHL hockey, and then much more to come, we hope, of course, both sports and entertainment. We continue to expand our light rail system and build more capacity at SeaTac Airport, which has been so important to supporting all this growth downtown. And looking ahead, we see an incredible opportunity to upgrade our digital infrastructure in downtown and take what is a static wayfinding system that exists today that really dates to the 1990s and still tells you the Kingdome is at the south end of town, and upgrade that system with these digital interactive kiosks to provide better ways for people to understand, move around, navigate, and experience our downtown. One of these is out in the lobby, and I invite you to take a look and play with it after the event today. So all of this infrastructure development over the last year has no doubt been disruptive. It almost feels like we're one big family living through a remodel together. And it's been harder to get around and access downtown, but it's all going to be worth it, and it all positions us for the next 100 years. Second highlight, it was a year of transformation. Town Hall transformed itself into a seismically sound structure through a $35 million reinvestment. The ITEL building at 2nd and Pike, which was vacant for several decades, the top floors at least, transformed itself into the State Hotel, a boutique hotel at 2nd and Pike with a great new restaurant in the ground floor, Ben Paris. Safeco Field transformed to T-Mobile Park. The top floor of King Street Station, which used to be home to Burlington Northern Santa Fe's offices way back when, is now home to the Seattle Office of Arts and Culture and a new art and culture gallery. And just a few blocks down at Stewart Street here, Seattle Children's Research Institute took an empty vacant parking lot and transformed it into a 540,000 square foot pediatric cancer research facility. In 2006, Seattle Children's just had 40 jobs in downtown Seattle, and today, nearly 2,000. And this new facility includes a state-of-the-art science lab that's going to serve high school kids across our city. I love Seattle Children's Research Institute. It's one of the best-kept secrets in our downtown. Every day, nearly 2,000 people working hard to find cures and treatments for childhood cancer that's going to serve kids in this region and around the world. It's a best-kept secret in downtown. Third highlight of 2019, Seattle's tech rush continued. 100 years ago, it was the gold rush that drove so much growth and investment and change in Seattle. This past year and years prior, it's been the tech rush. Amazon, of course, continued its expansion in the downtown. Apple, Google, and F5 moved in, and Expedia planted its flag along our waterfront. The mayor stole my stat, but I'll repeat it. Seattle was just one of 5 cities nationally that accounted for 90% of all technology jobs that were created over a 12-year period. We've cemented ourselves as the cloud capital of the world. And not surprising, technology jobs have been the fastest growing jobs in our economy over the last decade. Fourth highlight, partnerships. It was a year of some really powerful partnerships. Amazon provided half of one of its office buildings in the Denny Triangle to Mary's Place for 275 beds. 275 beds and other services and support for moms, kids, and dads, which will soon open later this spring. A key part of this as well is 75 mats and shelter capacity for families that are looking for space in the winter. It's the first winter family shelter in King County. So when it gets cold, that capacity exists in addition to those 275 beds that are there each and every day. That's really important for us in this county. Plymouth and Bellwether Housing, 2 of our incredible nonprofit housing providers here in Seattle, partnered on the first affordable high-rise in Seattle in 50 years up on First Hill. And this will be built on land provided by Sound Transit, an incredible partnership. And speaking of Bellwether, their roots go right back to the Downtown Seattle Association in the early 1980s, and the leaders of the organization at that time. They celebrate their 40th anniversary this year as an organization. And leaders from DSA in the late 70s and early 80s raised the seed money to start the organization, hired the first executive director, and provided office space for Seattle Housing Resources Group, which became Bellwether Housing more recently. Congratulations to them on their 40th anniversary. They are led by their CEO, Susan Boyd, and will have nearly 750 units of affordable housing under construction this year in Seattle and across our region. Pretty powerful partnership there. So I want to turn our attention from these 4 highlights over the last year to our downtown report card, our Live, Work, Shop, Play report card. We track data in those categories across these 12 neighborhoods, and we think this mix of residential, jobs, retail, and arts, entertainment, and sports is really key to vibrancy. You can go to lots of downtowns that have 2 or 3 of those. There's few that have 4, and this is why we pay close attention to how we're performing in these areas. There's now 88,000 people that live in downtown Seattle, and that's 42% growth in the last decade. That compares to about 15% growth across King County over the same period. So we continue to gain market share in population growth. And today we have one of the highest residential densities of any major US downtown. We're projecting 100,000 people will live downtown by 2024. Kids have been one of the fastest growing demographics in our downtown. The number of kids have doubled this decade in downtown Seattle. And check out the sharp increase here in the number of births on an annual basis in downtown, particularly after 2007. When we first moved downtown, just across the street here actually, I remember sort of getting funny looks from my neighbors in the elevator. They were sort of like judging you quietly that you live downtown with kids. And it was always somebody too with like a 150-pound dog. And so I would kind of quietly judge them back. Like, sir, you live in a studio apartment with a horse, okay? I don't have to take my kids on the roof to go to the bathroom in the middle of the night. But speaking of dogs and cats, there are 4,200 that live downtown now. And I couldn't believe we tracked this, but Charlie surpassed Lucy as the most popular dog name in downtown. Our research director, Elliot Kravinko, told me that, and I kind of challenged him. I was like, how do you know that? How did you find that? But he's like, I know it, I found it, and I put it in here. So we've made great progress in creating a downtown that's not just for office buildings, but that's for people too. And we have this incredible residential population, and now more families and more kids. That mix and diversity, I think, is really important, and we got to do everything we can to keep it. One of the threats is we lack public schools in the downtown, except for a small school at Seattle Center, a small high school there that the Seattle Public Schools run. But we have a great opportunity in front of us to change that, to locate a K-8 public school at the former entrance to the Battery Street Tunnel, which is now public land. This is an exciting opportunity we're talking to the city about, as well as Seattle Public Schools. Second category. Second category here in our report card is work. Employment increased 52% in the last decade in downtown Seattle. And that compares to 29% growth across King County over the same period. We lost about 28,000 jobs during the Great Recession in downtown Seattle, and we've added back more than 110,000. Overall, in 2019, we had the second most office absorption in the country behind Phoenix. And unlike some markets around the country that have experienced lots of job growth, we're growing in the right way. We're growing up. We're growing in density of jobs in our downtown. We're not growing out. We're not building office parks along highways. And I'm not picking on Phoenix, just letting you know. There's a right way to do this and a right way to grow employment in downtown, and we're doing just that. But we can take nothing for granted. There's cities across the country, across the region, that are fighting every day for our companies and our jobs. There's all those cities that still haven't recovered from the Great Recession that are getting up every day to try to steal our prosperity, steal those companies, steal those jobs. And one of the big threats is we're just running out of space. And this puts more and more pressure on rents for small and medium-sized and larger businesses in our city. So we need to plan now for 10, 20 years down the road of where we're going to locate office development in downtown. That's one of the big threats facing our continued prosperity. Next category is shop. Over the 10-year period, we've seen strong growth in taxable retail sales, about 56% growth over the decade. But recently, we're seeing some flattening of that growth and some stronger headwinds. We see this right now in our retail core, no doubt, with a significant number of vacancies, some notable vacancies. And I think we need to be mindful of this. Retail in downtowns has always been fragile. You can really count on two hands the number of downtowns that have thriving retail cores. We're one of them, and we need to keep it, and we need to do everything we can to keep it. Now, I don't think brick and mortar is going anywhere. People still desire that physical experience, and they still desire an urban shopping experience, so that's good for us. And over the last 5 years in particular, our retail core has shifted a bit to the north and to the south. We're seeing some new retail in the Denny Triangle with Sephora and Glassy Baby and some other retailers that have moved in. And there's an opportunity as well with the completion of Rainier Square Tower to continue to shift it south and to grow that footprint. And we're also seeing the ground floor environment shift and evolve to respond to this massive residential population as well. And that's playing out in a couple of different ways. One of those is 2019 was really the year of the grocery store. This is the space that PCC will soon move into at 5th and Union in the Rainier Tower, which will be the second tallest building in downtown. And PCC is not alone. Waijamaya is going through a multi-million-dollar renovation. H Mart opened 2 locations, one near Pike Place Market and another in South Lake Union. And Trader Joe's will open just down the street here in 2022. Since 2000, we've increased the amount of grocery space in downtown by about 85%. Finally, in the shop category, another bright spot. Pacific Place is putting the finishing touches on a multi-million-dollar renovation that was designed by a great DSA member, Gensler. They are creating more space for some of their iconic tenants. We'll bring more food, experience, art, and retail into this incredible new atrium. They've touched every surface in this place and completed a new entrance at 7th and Olive that opens up to the Denny Triangle and South Lake Union. Fourth and final category on our report card is play. Spending on arts, entertainment, and sports increased 70% over the last decade. The Sounders were a big part of this, of course, with their record attendance that they generated at CenturyLink to take home another MLS Cup. That was such a great day downtown with Macklemore and the crowd at Occidental. It was a terrific day downtown. Cruise ships were another big driver here. They had record boardings, 1.2 million people in 2019. Fifth Avenue is sending another production to Broadway. Mrs. Doubtfire is headed there. And 2020 is already being called the year of the princess in downtown, with Cinderella, Snow White, Bliss, and Frozen all running at our performance venues. And we always keep a close eye on gyms in this category. Take a close look at fitness and how it's evolving. And we used to joke that you could find a Starbucks on every corner in downtown Seattle. Now it seems like you can find a gym on every corner in downtown Seattle. One gym opened just about every month in downtown last year, and more are on the way. And I've been noticing that gyms have become much fancier, more complicated places. Like they're really high concept right now. And Choreo, this is one of those. Choreo, this is by Seattle Center, and it opened fairly recently, and it's the first bungee studio on the West Coast, the first bungee studio. And of course I had to try this out, right? I headed there on Tuesday. There's a little bit of false advertising, though, from Choreo, because it is not just my core that is sore after that, I'll let you know. And for all the guys that are going to go this week, for all the guys that are going to go check out Choreo, be mindful of the harness adjustments when they put you in that. It was a lot of fun, though. Here's another one. This one is not here yet, though. It's Burn, B-R-R-R-N. And this concept, it's the nation's first cold gym, where they turn this thermostat way down. It opened in New York City this past year, and these are the founders, Jimmy and Johnny here. Don't ask me who's who. I'm not that familiar with it. But if you go on their website, you can read their origin story for their gym, which started in a beer fridge in Brooklyn. Of course it did. Of course it did. Every gym has to have an origin story now, apparently. And each one of these sessions in their cold gym is $28, and then you can go to the sauna after that to warm back up for another $28. Remember when you could go to a gym for an entire month for $28? You could go as many times as you wanted to. You go in the morning, you go back at night. Anyway, gyms are evolving. But after you've gotten yourself all toned and trim at our local gyms here, you will now be able to head over to Seattle's new Selfie Museum, which opened this last weekend. This is for real. It's over by the Pike Place Market, Seattle's first selfie museum with all of these booths. There's not a bungee booth yet, but I'm sure they're going to figure that out with Choreo. And your ego must be this tall for you to enter the selfie museum. And because I know you're all wondering, yes, you can bring your dogs and cats to the selfie museum too. So there's much more detail and data and analysis on our report card in the economic report at your places. We work really hard on this to provide it each year to you, and I invite you to take it with you. And I think what our Report card and our highlights from the last year show is that we have a strong wind at our back in downtown Seattle as we look to the next decade. We are better positioned to host major sporting and entertainment events that have never come here with the investments we're making in the convention center and Key Arena. We are building a public realm for the 21st century by investing $1 billion in our waterfront and really committing to a walkable downtown. We are much more family friendly and continue to attract kids and families in the downtown. And with the historic investments we're making in light rail, we are much more accessible. People have more options and more are coming to move around and access our downtown. These are all incredibly important moves and investments that we are making that put us in a strong position for the future, there's no doubt. But all of this is at risk if we don't take immediate and urgent action to address the safety issues in our city and the dysfunction in our criminal justice system. Downtown's otherwise sunny skies and our bright future is darkened by some ominous clouds. And we can never take anything for granted. Downtowns have always been fragile places. Companies, small businesses, artists, customers, visitors, residents, they all have choices. They do not have to be here, and they have more choices than ever before. And if we want to keep them and attract others, we must be decisive in responding to last month's tragedy. Here's what we must do. Number one, we have to call this problem what it is. This is a deeply rooted drug market that's been in the middle of our downtown for 30 years. It fuels assaults, rape, and robbery. Violent crime in this part of downtown has increased by more than 30% in the last 3 years. I'm going to say this again because there's been a lot of talk about crime stats in the media lately. In this part of downtown, between Olive Way, Yesler, I-5, and the Water, violent crime is up 30% over 3 years. And we know that people avoid this intersection. They avoid it more than most. And we should not sugarcoat this reality. We got to face up to it. This is the worst kept secret in Seattle. Number two, we need action now. We need a bold action plan to break up this drug market and to reform our practices for how we're dealing with people that repeatedly commit crimes in our city and hurt other people. The system today is broken. We need more prevention, intervention, and more accountability. We need to do more to help those that are in need, that are getting caught up in this mess every day, whose lives are at risk, who are getting harmed, who are getting assaulted. We must do more. We need a bold action plan that's immediate and that is sustained. Number three, we need to improve this space. Third and Pine is really the lobby of our city. It's where everybody passes through. 50,000 transit riders on 3rd Avenue, all those folks in the tunnel. It's home to our arts and cultural institutions, our civic institutions like Pike Place Market, lots of small businesses, retail, and jobs. It's where everybody passes through. It's the lobby of our city. Any great hotel owner knows that's a space that ought to look the best. We need to make physical improvements to this part of town and upgrade the infrastructure. We've put long-range plans together to transform Pike and Pine Street and have secured $40 million to do that. We need to move up that investment. We've put together a vision to radically transform 3rd Avenue from Denny all the way to Jackson. We need to finance and fund that plan. While we're waiting for those investments to come online, we need to make small improvements right now to improve the quality of that environment and the physical space. And number four, we must lead. The people in this room must lead. The private sector, nonprofit leaders, civic leaders, community leaders, all of us in this room have an important role to play. I want to thank you for raising your voices over the last couple of weeks, of showing up to City Hall, of showing up to rallies, of sending letters, of talking about how these challenges that we face, these real challenges of safety, affect you, your colleagues, your customers. We must lead here. It's not about letting the public sector off the hook. There's a lot the county and city need to do differently. But we can bring our ideas to the table, our resources. We've got to be engaged as a downtown community to take back this part of our city. We want a downtown that's not only prosperous, but safe and welcoming for everybody. For the resident, for the barista, for the artist, for the small business owner, from the visitor from Issaquah and Istanbul, and for the most vulnerable among us that are either living in low-income housing in our downtown or on the streets. Downtown is really everybody's neighborhood. We really believe that. And we have been in this beast mode as a city for the last 20 years and counting. And we can solve this safety issue with the same mentality that we've demonstrated over those last 20 years. And we must send a strong message that the status quo is unacceptable. Enough is enough. I want to thank you for all you've done to support this great city, the people in this room that are making incredible things happen, for your support of the Downtown Seattle Association and our mission. We know this effort will not be easy, but I think you will agree when I say this downtown is worth it. Now let's get to work. Thank you.